Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Heather and I don't know about you, but these days I could use a really good laugh. So if you, like me, are desperately in need of something silly to brighten your mood and make you look at the world a little bit differently, here are some books that I definitely recommend. Full disclosure, I tried to organize these books into some sort of an order and then realized they were so unruly that they absolutely would not. The first book I would recommend for some gentle, sweet laughs is Sophia Khan is Not Obliged by Aisha Malik. This has been described as the Muslim version of Bridget Jones's Diary. However, I would say that I like Sophia Khan much more than I like Bridget Jones. It's the story of a modern-day Muslim woman who is trying to both stay true to her faith and find independence in her work and in her relationships. It's a very sweet, lovely rom-com, but with some truly hilarious moments, beginning right at page 1, when she describes her breakup with her previous fiance, I suppose, who proposed her living with his parents' family, divided only by a hole in the wall. And he then becomes known as Hole in the Wall Imran, sometimes abbreviated to HITW Imran. I don't know why, but that struck me as hilarious, and the rest of the book also continues in the same vein. So if you're just looking for some gentle comedy, this is a wonderful place to start. For more comedy that is both sweet and gentle, I would also recommend Peggy and Me by Miranda Hart. Miranda Hart has written several books, and you may know her from her television series or her job as a stand-up comedian, but this book in particular made me howl with laughter, no pun intended, as she described some of her childhood pets towards the beginning of the book, particularly one incident with her dog and a bird that she had rescued. It then goes on to describe her relationship with Peggy, who was her loving and faithful dog up until a few months ago. Sadly, Peggy has passed now. So there are quite a few touching moments, but there are some also wonderfully funny moments described as only Miranda can. If you're looking for something in a more classic vein, I would also recommend The Anything by P.G. Wodehouse. I particularly loved some of the phrases used in Stiff Upper Lip Jeeves when I read it last year. P.G. Wodehouse has a number of series. This one belongs to the Jeeves and Wooster series, about Bertie Wooster, a young upper-class gentleman in the 1920s who manages to get himself into terrible scrapes all the time, and his butler Jeeves is always the one to get him out of them again. What I particularly love about these books isn't necessarily the incidents that happen to Bertie, but the way that he describes them to the reader. There is such a distinct rhythm to them that I was consistently reading these sections out loud to my friend as we rode the train together. If you can't quite get the hang of the rhythm by reading them, I would recommend either listening to them or watching the television series with Hugh Laurie and Stephen Fry, and then coming back to the books. In addition, a young adult series that is slightly more unusual. Of course, I always recommend anything by Louise Renison. There are many funny young adult series, but one that you may not have heard of is Sorcery and Cecilia, or The Enchanted Chocolate Pot, by Patricia C. Reed and Carolyn Sturvemer. Or perhaps Caroline, I'm not sure. I discovered these when I was 13 or 14, so I had just entered my Austen obsession, and these are perfect. They take during the Regency, and they are the stories of two sisters, at least I think they're sisters, Kate and Cecilia, or Ceci, and they take place in an alternate reality Regency period where magic is quite commonplace. And Kate and Ceci fall into incredible adventures, but the way they tell them to each other is quite lovely. And they are epistolary, and indeed were written that way. Each of the authors took the persona of Kate or Ceci and then wrote each other letters in order to write the story in the first place, which just makes it extra special. I will read the back to you, as that's often what made me laugh, and I have a feeling my summary did not do this book justice. Dear reader, a great deal is happening in London this season. For starters, there's the witch who tried to poison Kate at the Royal College of Wizards. She must have mistaken Kate for the mysterious Marquis, which is curious since they look nothing alike. And a handsome man seems to be spying on Cecilia, though he's not doing a very good job of it. So just what are his intentions? Then there's the strange spell that has made our friend Dorothea the toast of the town. Could it possibly have something to do with the charm bag under Oliver's bed? Speaking of Oliver, how long can we make excuses for him? Ever since he was turned into a tree, he hasn't bothered to tell anyone where he is. Clearly, magic is a deadly and dangerous business, and we might be in fear for our lives. If only we weren't having so much fun. Love, Kate and Ceci. This is a trilogy of books if you enjoyed the first one, so if you love Austen and you love a bit of magic and silliness, definitely check these out. Now we enter the slightly more uproarious side of humor. And to link in with things set in the Regency, since I know many of you are Austen fans like myself, I would also recommend the graphic novel Bloodlust and Bonnets by Emily McGovern. This is the story of a bunch of Regency characters, including Lord Byron, who go on outrageous, fantastical adventures involving vampires and ghosts and magic, very much in the Gothic strain, but lovingly poking fun at everything we love about Bronte novels and Austen films in the best possible way. The illustrations are adorable, and you can tell exactly how much love Emily McGovern has for the original material. You can read it through in 1 or 2 days, as it is very short, but it is such a fun romp. And if you enjoy Emily McGovern's work and also Harry Potter, I would also recommend her comics My Life as a Background Slytherin, which is how I came to know her first. This is a comic series that she has been publishing online for ages now about Emily, who is one of the characters in the background of Harry Potter, who is also a Slytherin, who you never hear from in the books or the films. And it lovingly pokes fun at everything we love about the Harry Potter franchise. These are sometimes published into tiny little bind-up volumes, but you can also read them all online, and I will link them all down below. So there's My Life as a Background Slytherin, Selected Comics Part 2. There are other characters that you meet as well, such as the background Gryffindor, Kevin, the background Hufflepuff, and I don't remember, she's the background Ravenclaw, but I forget her name. Special bonus comics featuring a very sexy Dumbledore. And finally, all the flounces, featuring all of our favorite Snape cartoons, who is famous for flouncing his way through Hogwarts. They are adorable, they are sweet, and they are hilarious. Great if you need a quick pick-me-up. If you're in the mood for something short, I would recommend The Thurber Carnival by James Thurber, which is a collection of his short stories. This is something that I probably never would have read if my mother didn't love it. These were short stories that we loved reading together when I was around 10 and 11 years old, our particular favorite being The Night the Bed Fell, in which a young boy describes all of his various family living together, and when his father's bed falls apart in the attic, all of the chaos and misunderstandings that ensue, with many hilarious consequences. Another book, which is in fact an adult, that I discovered when I was a child, is Sam Levinson's Everything But Money. This is another one that I loved to read with my mother, especially when I was sick, when I was around 10 and 11. Particularly the first portion. These are autobiographical memoirs of Sam Levinson, who was a major entertainer in, I would guess, the 40s and 50s. I'm not entirely sure of the timeline. But the first section of this describes his parents and his family growing up in pre-1950s New York as Jewish immigrants, and all of the hilarious things that they went through. Mama Levinson is my particular favorite, and both my mother and I can identify that we're having Mama Levinson moments to each other and know exactly what that means. But here again, I think anyone can relate to this. Everyone has a mother or a grandmother who would do similarly silly things in utter seriousness, and it makes perfect sense to you at the time until you start to think about it. Saying such things as pointing at a mark from a ball that was left on the ceiling and pointing at it saying, "I scrubbed that ceiling on my hands and knees, now who did it?" This is one that I plan to reread this summer, as it hit me that I've never actually read the entire book. And indeed, I would love to read its sequel. For more non-fiction comedy, I would also recommend Tall Tales and Wee Stories by Billy Connolly. Billy Connolly is a comedian who never fails to make me laugh at just the ridiculousness of life in general. In this book, he has written down some of his best stand-up routines so that they are preserved while he himself has retired from the stage. I can't even describe some of the routines to you. I looked through one and found one that makes me roar. They can be rather racy, though, as anyone who has seen Billy Connolly ever knows. But they never fail to make me laugh. And indeed, there were some that I had never heard before. So it's well worth a read. In more true humor, if you can have true crime, shouldn't you be able to have true humor? There's also Weird Things Customers Say in Bookshops by Jen Campbell, and indeed its sequel, More Weird Things Customers Say in Bookshops. These are all true records of things that Jen Campbell was told or overheard in her time as a bookseller. You may know her from BookTube, so I will link her channel as well as her book down below. Finally, in the truly ridiculous, sometimes bordering on the absurd, I have two recommendations. The first is the classic The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. I haven't read any of the other books in this series, but this first one made me roar, such that lots of people were giving me very strange looks in my university library as I sat in the corner giggling helplessly. If you're unfamiliar with it, it is the story of Arthur Dent, who one morning is shocked to discover that his friend Ford Prefect is in fact an alien, and who manages to whisk him away in the nick of time as the Earth is destroyed to make way for a hyperspace bypass. And all sorts of adventures ensue from there that get more and more absurd. But the way Douglas Adams tells you the story, you can't help but laugh. If you've already read and enjoyed Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, then I would also recommend Good Omens by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett, which is the story of the apocalypse, as told by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett. In it, an angel and a demon, Crowley and Aziraphale, have been living on Earth for millennia now, since the Garden of Eden, keeping an eye on humanity and waiting for the time when the apocalypse will begin. However, in that time, they've gotten rather used to life on Earth and rather like it. So when it does come about, they're rather disappointed, but they take on their jobs nonetheless. However, when delivering the Antichrist, there is a mix-up, and the Antichrist is in fact given to a completely normal English family. As this child grows up, you're waiting to see, will his supernatural side or the human side win out? It is hilarious, it is a wonderful and engaging romp, and the ending is so truly beautiful. It's one of my favorite last lines ever, and I can't tell you what it is because it will spoil it. But I think it deals with nature and nurture and human nature in the best possible way. This has been one of my favorite books from the time I was about 16 for that very reason. So there you have it. Those are a few books that I always turn to when I need a good laugh. Let me know down below if you would recommend any other funny books, or if you have any other questions or comments about the books that I chose. I always love hearing from you. Until next time, be safe, be well, and happy reading. Bye everyone.